is up, guys? It's Wednesday. I'm Tony Durhammer, owner of Hammer Tech Racecars, and we're doing our weekly series that we call What's Your Problem? Wednesday. Now, with it being, Thanksgiving Eve, we thought, let's do a special episode. So we're going to do a special episode today for you guys. We normally talk about 3 issues that you guys are having out there, some of the problems you're having, and how you can change things in your program to make them better. So the special episode today, we're going to talk about this mysterious, scary 4-link stuff that I get asked about a lot. And we're going to get some information out for you guys. And it's a value exchange. So if this video gives you some value, give us some value back. Give us a share, give us a like, subscribe to our stuff, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. On our YouTube channel, you can catch up on all the previous episodes of this series that we're doing. So make sure to go online, check that out. While you're sitting around with your buddies, with your family at Thanksgiving, you can catch up on all these episodes. So it's a great time to do it. Like I said, if it helps you, help us. Get the word out. That's all we're trying to do, is get some information out for you guys so you can better your careers and have more fun, be safe, and go faster. So what is this mysterious, crazy, black magic 4-link thing that everybody's talking about? So the 4-link is your 4 bars from your rear end housing forward to your mounts on your chassis. We're going to talk about slick tire setups. We're not going to get into radial stuff and things like that. It gets a little crazy, but on the slick tire stuff, that's what we're going to cover today. So your 4-link bars are those bars, and what can they do for you? They can do, lots of things. They can help you drive straight. You can help your car go straighter. You can plant the tire more. You can take, create wheel speed. Lots of things that you can do with these bars if you know how to adjust it, when to adjust it. These are the things that you got to do. So let's start off with a basic scenario. Customer brings in his car, truck, whatever it is. Where do we start? So what we start with is we will get the rear end centered in the car. So we're not more to the left, we're not more to the right. We're actually on the center line of the chassis. Now, once we know that, then we'll square it up to where if you measure from your 4-link brackets on your rear end forward to the rear cross member, that dimension is exactly the same. So you want to have everything square and centered before you ever get started. And once we get that set up, we'll start with setting your pinion angle. Pinion angle can vary, anywhere from 1 degree to 3 degrees. Most of the time we're in the 2 to 3 degree of pinion angle, depending on how stiff your chassis is, the quality of your heim joints, your 4-link stuff. All these things play into how much pinion angle you're going to start with. So you think of your pinion is always trying to climb the ring gear. So it's always trying to come up. And when it comes up, it tries to straighten out that drive shaft to where you don't want it to be over-centered. You want to start with a V and try to get it to be straight. So 2 to 3 degrees on most setups are normally enough. Your days of having 5 degrees of pinion angle that your grandpa told you it was cool to help get bite and all these things, those days are long gone. And your stuff's going to live last, your U-joints are going to last. You're not going to be chucking drive shafts out. So let's just start with 2 degrees probably of pinion angle. That's where we start. Now, once we get the pinion angle set, we know everything's centered. There's some more measurements that we need to do. So what we'll do is we'll set it on the scales, and we'll measure the wheelbase, which is the center of the rear axle, to the center of the front spindle. Now, once you know this dimension, with it sitting on scales, you can measure how much weight's on the front and how much weight's on the back. And that'll give you all the measurements you need to calculate your center of gravity distance from front to back. Now, if you want to know the height of it, what most guys do is, if they're not going to spend the time and effort to figure it out exactly, is they'll just go off of the center of their camshaft, which is generally pretty close. If you want to know exactly what we do here is we'll measure everything at ride height, race weight, driver in the car as close as we can get it to what it's going to be when it goes down the track, and we'll measure the bolt center lines on the shocks from top to bottom, and we'll make solid bars to where we can take the shocks out, put those in. Ride height doesn't change, and then with it sitting on the scales, we'll jack it up 10-12 inches and measure the weight difference that it gains from jacking it up. And then that tells you the exact, I'm talking to the 100th of an inch of height that your CG is going to be. So there's lots of calculators out there that can help you do this online, programs that you can download. But let's show some of the math that goes into these things. So once you know your wheelbase, what it weighs on the front, what it weighs on the back. So let's say our wheelbase is 112 inches, which is kind of common. This is just a generic car. It's not any kind of customer car. You know, I'm just making these numbers up as we go. So let's say on the front, we weigh 2,000 pounds. On the back, we weigh 1,400 pounds. So how do we figure out this distance of CG? Well, we take our total weight of the front divided by the total weight complete, and we get 0.59. That's 59% front bias. And you can double check that by doing the measurement on the back. 1,400 pounds divided by 3,400 is 0.41. 41% plus 59% is 100%. So you're 100% of the weight. We've got that figured out. Now you take your wheelbase times 0.59 and you end up with 66.08 inches. Now, this is where guys get confused because they think, well, everything's on the front. I just measure back 66.08 inches. That's where my CG is, right? Wrong. This dimension is actually from the center line of the axle forward. So from the center of the axle forward, 66.08 inches is where your CG is. You can double check that again by doing the back. 112 times 0.41 is 45.92. Measure it from the front back. These two added together equals our 112. So everything is, the mass adding up, we're on the right track. So now we know where the CG is front to back. And if you were to put a cable where that dimension is and pick your car or truck up, it would be perfectly balanced front to back. Now, we're not saying go get your buddy's forklift and try to pick your race car up. That's what this video is trying to keep you from doing. So once we know the CG, what we're going to do is we're going to draw an imaginary line straight forward, level to the ground, and then we're going to come straight up from the front spindle, and where those meet is a point. Now we're going to take that point back to the contact patch under the axle and draw that line. That line is your anti-squat line. It's a very beneficial thing to know exactly where this line is so that 100% anti-squat is your neutral. So in the perfect world, if you put your 4-link bars right on the anti-squat line at 0, it would have no wasted movement. You wouldn't be compressing the shocks, you wouldn't be extending the shocks, it would just be all forward momentum. Now, we don't live in a perfect world, so we're always trying to add traction. You guys make big power, so we gotta have a way to plant that tire down. So 100% anti-squat is neutral. Now below the anti-squat line is gonna be less than 100%, is going to actually suck that tire up into the chassis. So you're going to compress your rear shocks when you leave. Now, there's situations where you have to be under that. If your customer has 4-link brackets bolted on, welded on, that you can't get above that line, you got to figure out a way to do it. So we can do it with shock settings and springs and things like that. We can make it work, but ideally you want to be above that line. So when you start getting above the line, now I'll draw this out to where you guys can kind of understand. So this is your 4-link bar to your chassis mount. And there's your bottom bar coming out. So if you draw these imaginary lines out to where they intersect, we're above the anti-squat line. So let's say it's 125% anti-squat. What's that gonna do? So when we leave, the tire is actually going to be pushed down to the ground. The chassis is going to come up, so you're going to have extension on your rear shock. So you're adding force down. Now, if it's below, you're going to take that away. So you're going to get a bunch of wheel speed. You'll be prone to doing wheelies. You know, wheelies are cool. Everybody likes to see them, but it's not going to make you go fast. So we want to try to stay above it at all costs. Now, you can get too far to where you're actually smashing that tire and it's cupping up and driving over itself, and you're not going to be going any quicker to the 60 foot. So there's a fine line of height of that instant center. Now, the further forward you go, the less violent it's going to be. The closer you get it to the rear end, the more violent that separation is going to happen. So like the radio guys, they like to have a bunch of separation and just try to shove that tire through the concrete and get all the traction they can. But slick tire stuff, there's a fine line of where you can do it. Now, let's dive back a little bit into the shocks. So the shock placement on your car can help with this. So say you have a 6-inch shock. 50% would be 3 inches of compression, 3 inches of rebound, and we're just going to set it up at neutral. Now, if I know for a fact that we're going to be able to get above 100% anti-squat, what I'll do is I'll actually give it more extension than compression. So on our same 6-inch shock, I'll set it to where we have 2 inches of compression and 4 inches of rebound. So I can control the rebound, basically how hard that tire is going to stay hooked up going down the track, along with, you know, your rebound settings and shocks and springs, and all the stuff plays into it. But that's the general idea of all this stuff, is to shove that tire down. So once we're above here, what it's actually going to try to do is the body and the chassis is going to pivot this way, which will actually help shove your front tire down. So you're going to be less prone to wheeling. You're going to add more bite on the rear. So that's just part of the 4-link system. We know where our CG is. We know where our instant center is going to land. We have a ton of adjustments we can make to add traction, to take away traction. What do we do if we do all these things and the car leaves but it drives left or right? Now what do we do? So the first thing that I try to do is I'll actually do preload. So preload is the upper bar on the passenger side is where I adjust preload. And all preload's doing is it's taking that axle and it's twisting it up and down just like that. So if it's driving to the left, we know, and especially if it's sitting on the scales and you start adjusting preload, you can see it move 50, 60 pounds, quite a lot of weight in a hurry from left to right. So we'll go back to we leave and the thing's driving left. So what do? We start adding preload. So we'll go 2 to 3 flats. Now your tube adapters, normally everybody's got the tube adapters with the 6 flats on it, and that's what we call a flat. So when you change a flat, that's what we're talking about. Now I don't like to go more than, say, 3 flats, which is half of a rotation on the preload adjustment, because you're just going to start getting things in a bind. So we have our car, we're at the track, things driving left a little bit, we do our preload, it helped it, but it's still going just a little bit. Now what do? So the next step I will do is add rear steer. So rear steer is, you think of it as your front tires versus your back tires. When we started, everything was square. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to cock this rear end shorter or longer to get the car to go straight. So if the car's driving left, what we're going to do is we're going to take this rear end and we're going to shorten the passenger side, which will drive it back to the right, like a forklift. You know, when you're driving a forklift, the rear tires are normally your steer tires, so it actually turns opposite of which way you're trying to go. So if it's going left, we're going to shorten the right side. If it's going right, we're going to lengthen the right side. I like to do all my adjustments on the passenger side. That's just the way I do it. Some guys will do it on the left. That's, you know, you can get the same results, but most guys do it from the passenger side. So we'll adjust preload with the upper bar. And once that's not enough, we'll change our rear steer. Now, once you change rear steer, you need to readjust the rear end being centered in the car, because if you got a wishbone or drag link, whatever it is, X, it's when you adjust that, it's going to shove it over one side versus the other. So once you get your rear steer, you got to recenter it up. Now, when we measure rear steer, we'll measure from the wheel hub center line. So if you measured your wheelbase, it was 112, we're going to go an 1/8 inch to 3/16. So say we're 11 7/8 on this side wheelbase. That's our 1/8 inch of rear steer. Some guys will measure it on the 4-link bars. There's nothing wrong with that. You just got to be careful of going too much. We don't try to go anything more than a 1/2 inch of rear steer at the hub. So our shortest dimension that we're going to get out here is 11.5. Now, an 1/8 inch of rear steer, you're going to notice, you know, it doesn't take a lot to start bringing that car back. So we go back to the track, we got our 1/8 inch of rear steer. It's still driving left just a little bit. Now what do? So now I go back to our preload settings again, and I keep adjusting the preload. So once I get to my 3 flats and 1/8 inch of rear steer in the car, if it's still driving left, then I'll go back to neutral on preload. I'll add another 1/8 inch, and then we'll be at 1/4, and I'll just keep tweaking on it like that, making passes until the thing goes straight. You don't want to go, you know, cranking your preload 1 turn, 2 turn, you know, you see this a lot where these guys are just using one of these adjustments to try to fix a problem that could be, you know, easily just a little changes on a couple things. So once you get past the point, it's going to start binding on stuff, and you're not going to get the suspension movement that you want that's nice and free and fast. So like I said, rear steer, add preload. If that's not enough, add more rear steer, then add preload, and just keep going until you get the thing going back straight. So keep in mind, you gotta, every time you move that rear steer, you got to keep centering up your axle. So I hope this helps. You know, this mysterious 4-link thing, there's no black magic in it. So it's all just math and knowing what to adjust, when to adjust it. So if you need help with it, you know, give us a call. We love helping you guys. That's what we're all about here. And like I said, guys, I appreciate all the support on these videos, and I hope everyone has a happy Thanksgiving tomorrow, and we'll just see you next time. Thanks, guys.